Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Nicholas McKay, a first-year graduate student at Technical University München's program of Responsibility in Science, Technology, and Society. This is our first episode of STS Shorts, a new video series from Eclectic Spacewalk in which we dialogue with a researcher, lecturer, writer, and/or eclectic human in the science, technology, and society discipline or related fields. These shorts will only be around 30 minutes in length, and the goal is to highlight and hopefully introduce a new audience to their work. Please grab a coffee, drink, and open your curious mind as we dive right in. Today, we are pleased to be joined by Martin Pérez Comisso. Martin is a Ph.D. student at Arizona State University's Program for Human and Social Dimension of Science and Technology. Welcome to STS Shorts, Martin.
Hi, Nick. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So your research focuses on the ways in which people and things interconnect in transnational technological projects, governance, engagements, and theories. So before joining ASU, you were a lecturer at the Universidad de Chile, Universidad Diego Portales, and Universidad Mayor in related areas to critical studies of technology, science, and tech communication and knowledge governance. So can you give us a brief overview of your time before joining ASU and how did you become interested in the field in the first place?
Yes, totally. I started my travel to become an STSer when I entered in crisis with my own degree in that time. I studied chemistry 10 years ago, and I did my master in quantum chemistry in Chile. And I started to figure out that despite science is extremely fun, in my country in Chile, there was a huge discussion starting from the borders, from the communities of researchers in different disciplines about the governance of science, how deficient it was, how very little people was actually caring about science, how was taken the scientific community for a very specific group of researchers that done a very important job to keep science during the dictatorship in Chile and to maintain institutions, things like that. But in the same people that was in charge of science in different institutions in the 90s was the same people in 2010. Mm-hmm. But a new generation of researchers was trying to make it science in Chile, but the instruments, the policies, the different communities, institutions, universities weren't prepared to receive all this influx of new ideas, new theories, new scholars, and new communities of knowledge. In particular, disciplines like sustainability were really in the margins, despite the relevance that we everybody can agree is today. Another interdisciplinary work were really not considered valuable for not just for the institution, but also for the scientific system. And I start to reflect strongly about what histories, governance, and mechanisms has my country to make science happen. And I started to be very, very interested in that. And I had the chance on my degree in chemistry to meet a professor that was my professor of quantum science, but also the professor of history of chemistry. And with that, I started to make questions about why science in Chile it's how it is, why our histories are populated with big names of men from the 17th, 18th, and 19th century, but Latin American people is not in those histories, or barely is. There's one Nobel Prize that is usually mentioned, despite there's just two on chemistry and things like that. I'm starting to observe people is really passionate for doing research in science that is impactful, but we don't have venues to make the impact. And all that kind of things were in some way forming at the same time. There was communities that was trying to organize and research the role of science communication in my country. And I started to say realize that for me was more important to support the process of sciences than to do science itself, because very little people was giving attention in that time to why we do science in Chile. And also that started to for me be a travel of reflection and reading about why we do the science in the way that we do it, and what kind of like mechanism systems and infrastructures we have to produce it. And my
so really like
biggest,
co-producing of the socio-technical, like how science gets made in general, really, not just the actual science.
yes, exactly. But the idea of like the co-production, I say, is something that appears a way later in my own reflection.
Okay, yeah, true. Okay.
My first reading were like on two levels, was like works of like Susan Cousin and David Guston and other authors like looking in organizations and institutions science, but also I start to like find in the same literature readings about like the politics of technologies and the politics of infrastructures, and like people like London Winner pop up in my readings.
Of course.
Donna Haraway start to be a
Yep.
very intriguing and attractive way of reading. But also I had the chance in 2011, it was the International Year of Chemistry, to teach a course on history of chemistry with this professor, but like for an interdisciplinary audience. We had like 300 students in the first year, and like he asked me to like do the 20th century, because like for him, like everything that comes after the quantum people was like kind of like blurry and weird, because he actually lived that things. He met a lot of people, like some Nobel Prizes, some quantum scientists in his job. He's now I think 86, if I'm not. Yeah, and he retired. He was like 80, like 6 years ago, little before I came to ASU. And but that experience of this like very senior professor of chemistry, like and the chance to like teach with him history of science, for me was like a really insightful opportunity to say like, actually this history has a lot of things that like we are missing. And
Right.
and I started to like look my research in, like I was studying like an enzyme that is in our brain. It's called monoamino oxidase A, that is dedicated to like degrade neurotransmitters like serotonin. Like it's like the only enzyme that destroys the things when like are done of their use. And I was like, and I was seeing all these issues and like observing all these questions, and I was like, I think my career should go in this other way. And I started to engage with STS readings. But also, this was in 2011. We continued teaching that class, and I graduated from chemistry in 2013. But in early 2014, a lot of like these new communities of like young graduated, that people get with PhDs in weird things, started to appear like that they got trained for different forms in STS in Europe. And that people was like starting to get like some positions in different departments, in engineering, in medicine, in a lot of sociology, in anthropology, and they start to like also question why there's not a CS in Chile, because you can see like when you see Latin America until like 2010, there's like communities of social studies of science or critical technology studies or things like that, like communities itself and programs existed in Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, and Mexico. But Chile wasn't having anything like so much. There was like people that sometimes publishing some things, but we know very little about the science system, the infrastructures, the ways in technologies work. And I crossed with this group of people, this amazing group of people, and one of these, like actually two, Sebastian Ureta and Maite Salazar, they both decided to make a first event for free in their universities. And that was the first STS or CTS meeting in Chile in 2014, in January 2014. And I had the chance to go and like see all these talks and say like, actually, this is extremely cool.
Okay.
And when I graduate, I also, because I was teaching history of science, and then I got the chance from other schools in my university, University of Chile, where I study my undergrad and my master, because there was like very good people, and I had like just my master. People was like, oh, we actually want to have these conversations and discussion. And I got invited with a friend who's a lawyer to teach a class on like governance of science and technology, and we was also like interested in my course. I got invited to the economy school to teach a course about like introduction to technology, because they had like introduction of science with other natural scientists talking about like why science is so cool. But also I was like engaging with those issues of technology and like theories of technology, and I got the chance to teach a course in there that then escalate a lot, and even I created a Coursera for the University of Chile, and that is still in there. That's like how technology changed us. And all these courses and all that teaching start to happen because I was in a time that like these topics start to be like more relevant in the academic discussion in my country, but also wasn't so much people specialized or looking to STS theories or to STS conversations. And I was like self-trying myself to like prepare those classes and discovering those things and having these conversations with these other people that were like just arriving from different degrees in the UK, in Spain, in France, in other places. And I was learning from those experiences that was like taking shape in Chile. And also I find a lot of other people in my age, my range of age. At that time, I was like 24, 25, that was like finishing their masters or they were starting a master, and they were like also interested in STS. So it's like I started to create a community of practice of STS in Chile. And I think
so a trailblazer of sorts. I mean, you're bringing histories and kind of putting all these things from different sources. And then you're like, well, I need to actually like look at this through a Chilean perspective. So how does like reflexivity come through that? Like, how do you like, you know, kind of reflect on that as being, you know, Chilean, but then also you're at the forefront of bringing this STS kind of thought to Chile?
It's a part, yeah. I think the generation of people that become faculty were like in the forefront itself, but also I was like trying to, and I think this is something that I can affirm, that I was like trying to experimenting with a lot of people to create courses and like pedagogies on Chile at the time that focus on these conversations and discussion, and also like how also can be impactful. For instance,
right.
and I will say, just to make the like final transition, when I decided to like I want to do a PhD in this, and I was like, okay, Chile is not the option to this because there's not a PhD in this topic.
Got it.
Was like in January of 2014, we had this meeting, and somebody mentioned that like in later than year in August, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, that is the closest capital from Santiago, that's my city, was like, it's going to be the global society of STS having their meeting. Actually, it was the first time ever that they met with Latin America, and the second time will happen in December of next year.
Okay.
But so I have the chance with like a very little money to take a flight, go to Buenos Aires, and enjoy the extremely fun and weird because it was a trilingual for us. Like because Argentina has this like long community and also are very resistant to like global north in some form, they decided to make it like multilingual to resist like just people that knows English can like talk about what is science and technology. And the conversations was like really interesting. Latin America has like probably like a 60 years tradition of STS that is not in conversation with mainstream STS, I will say. And ideas of co-production has other names in the region. And despite our like huge contribution that we have attributed to Yasano, different places in the world have figured out those kind of issues in different ways, but are published in their local languages, in Spanish or Portuguese in the case of Latin America, but also you can find publications in Hindi, or you can find publications in German or in French, in other places that actually convey the same meaning, but are not published in the main journals. And I think that is a defining moment for me for two reasons. First, because it makes me decide I want to do a PhD in STS, yes or yes, and I just start to look programs with this specific focus and not something that I can do a dissertation in STS, but I will be training as other thing. Like I want to be intentionally interdisciplinary. Second, I think makes me approach to the field always with this like international, transnational community question about like what is actually happening in other places, because science and technology are global phenomena. Are global phenomena that express and situate very differently. But what I'm not seeing that might be relevant, and that makes like all my continuing readings on technology and in science policy and technology policy and technology communications start to be looking what is missing, and I'm starting to find other scholars in other fields and in other places in the world like doing those questions and making those emphases. And I think that I think was an important factor when I look in ASU for like do my PhD.
That's awesome. Like, and so it's the human and social dimension of science and technology, your PhD. And then also you, like how I found you was on Twitter, through your Technologia kind of graph or picture that's on your, Twitter profile or pinned tweet or something like that. Yeah. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, like technology appropriation and artifacts and systems. But then secondly, I mean, as you were just talking about in a very multicultural and multinational thing is CACHO is your kind of class is Decolonizing Science and Technology. It's both in English and in Spanish, and it's basically around transnational collaborative research. So I'll just give one sentence that, and you can kind of go into it more, but forming equitable partnerships and with students across the Americas to learn to decolonial approaches to international research related to science, technology, and innovation. So I saw Donna Haraway and situated knowledges. I saw some other things like I myself this past week, we just went through some of the Kim Tallbear texts, with Native American DNA. So maybe talk about CACHO and then how to, that kind of has gone from you starting at ASU to then now like you're teaching this kind of multidisciplinary, but then also in multiple languages. I mean, that's kind of the dream it must be for you that you can like offer a, course for that's so kind of close to the situated knowledges that, you're kind of are talking about.
Okay. I will try to like unpack different elements that you bring. I arrived to ASU in 2017. Took me like 3-4 years. Mm-hmm. First, because like English was a challenge. And I think most, non-native speakers of English will tell you that like usually that's one of the biggest challenges that we have to like get an international degree. Yeah. But fortunately, I was able to get a full-rate fellowship to support me in English and also like support me all the process to arrive to the US. And ASU attracts me for the schooling where I am, the School of Future of Innovation Society that housed this like Ph.D. in STS with its very long name. We call it HSD. But also it's a school that like incorporates futures studies and development studies, and that are actually the concerns that STS in Latin America currently have or like historically have. Like in this role about like internationalism or development are not conversations are strong in like when we read Latour or Jasanoff. They mention global things, but they don't care about like sustainable development goals and science. And that is a common conversations in a society that is the Latin American Society of STS. And in ASU, this is combined. And this was the only program that has like contact with these other fields at the same time. And the faculties are like overlapping with everything. That means that they incorporate STS in the different practices. And when I arrived here, I started to work with the professor Mary Jane Parmentier, and like she's an expert in Latin America, but also she had like not just Latin America, also like North Africa, and also she works with a lot of people around the world, but in development. She's not like she knows STS, but like she don't teach STS at other faculties in the school, but this combination between like a kind of like global focus, the school also have a master and recently a PhD in global development and innovation, and STS attracts me particularly to ASU, and I think here I start to find a lot of people with common interests. In addition to Mary Jane, a few times later arrived a new professor as one of my advisors, like Professor Lindsay Smith. And when she arrived, it was this opportunity to like create a new course, and we and the school invited me and Mary Jane and Lindsay and other people to like apply to this weird course that was like kind of like online course that connects people. Because during my time in ASU, like my first 2 years, I discovered that like despite there was like this global conversation in one part, doesn't permeate anything of the curriculum or anything of the conversations that happens in STS. And it's like, wait, I come from a region, I have read all these like 5 years, different theories and different ideas about the same things that you're saying, but like you claim that like it's just American, or like you are looking at just from a very Western perspective. Right. Science and technology is global and we should do something. And just happens that arrived 3 students from Puerto Rico after the Hurricane Maria in a special program of ASU that they're amazing. They transfer and they initially, and then like the engineering division, things like that. And they got interested with what was happening in our school. They arrived a Mexican student, who was a Mexican student too. there has been like people from Peru and from other people places from Latin America. There was a deep connection, and not just with Latin America, with South Asia and everything. But the Latin American thing, because the HSD start to have like a large population of Latin American HSDers, we start to say like things that like I was observing in the program were like actually an issue, because we're like missing conversations and missing opportunities of training, and like we are under-knowledging the globality of science. And we applied to a little grant. We got that grant, and we got the opportunity to like make a collaborative international course. And CACHO born in 2019 to make the first version in the beginning of the pandemic.
Wow.
It's a 7-week course that is dedicated to 3 things. First, to open up the conversations about science and technology in the Americas. I mean, like, and for a reason, we just not focus on that there is like one way of doing STS, but also we focus that there's like multiple ways to do STS that depends on where we are. And for a reason, we need to like develop and this is the second focus, the skills to research collaboratively internationally. And I think that like learn how to research is the big thing that you learn in a grad program.
Yep.
But like how you collaborate internationally, not necessarily. Like you usually do your research for your own, or you work with labs, and like your advisor might have like some collaborations. But we think was like a critical skill, in particular in the field of like STS and development, to face the difficulties and like the awkwardness of working in different time zones, in different languages, with different resources, how we can like leverage specific digital technologies and opportunities to like make these things happen. And what kind of agreements we need to do, with kind of like assumptions we have with the work with others. And we work with other 3 universities, the University of Mar del Plata in Argentina, the University of Concepcion in Chile, and the University of Guadalajara in Mexico. And we start to, and despite initially we started in ASU, we strongly designed the course to be a collaborative effort. And even the course has been, after that, was like, have done several other times in the University of Concepcion. And we're like just doing our second section in this time. The first version was March to May 2020. And like now we're doing a version in the other time of the year that this started in October and like ends in December. And we have students from the 4 universities that they create teams, and they develop like tiny research projects that we focus to be to incorporate these critical theories of science and technology. They need to like gather data from their communities or from their different local sources. Not necessarily it needs to be like primary data. Because it's a very short learning experience, but very, very intense. But they need to create a knowledge mobilization artifact. That means like whatever they, like in the first 2 or 3 weeks, they start to create a proposal, and they start to find like common questions, and like they design a problem that involves science, but also involves place. And this combination of science in places, but multiple places, makes the course happen. And we have had things about like policies of entrepreneurship, policies of entrepreneurship, things on COVID health interventions. That wasn't the first time. Things about not animal interaction, things about like forest, things about different issues and problems that affects communities, that requires a high level of knowledge, a high and specialized level of knowledge systems to be on play. But we tend to assume that like, no, this is just happening here. And it's like, actually, no.
So they're situated not local, but then also collaborative in each one. And so like when you put those together, then you kind of get a better piece of like what is exactly happening, or at least some type of frameworks of research to then go about it. Because you just named off some pretty interesting subjects: COVID, forests, non-material stuff, or non-human. So like it seems like you're putting all together. We have about 5 minutes left, so but I'll put links of everything and people can like look through it more. But I did want to get to your recent what you're looking at now is exploring anti-futures. So about non-places, negative spaces, and heterotopias in Latin America. So maybe in 3 to 4 minutes, let's wrap up like what exactly is anti-futures, because it seems like that you're deconstructing a lot of like futuristic discourses about Latin America and then provoking like the challenge of devising your own, not letting things. So you explain.
Yeah, I will say my dissertation, like during my time in ASU, I worked some years in other project, but during COVID, I decided to like change my dissertation topic and remake my team. In addition to Professor Smith, I work with Professor Lauren Keeler as a futurist, or like a foresight scholar, and I put them together to like look on the notion of Latin American futurism. That is like my topic of dissertation. But when I start to look like I have like two purposes in here. My first purpose is observe what is the role of futurism in Latin America and what kind of like Latin American contributions there are on the field. And I'm start to like, and it's something that I is starting to see that just happens in the last year and a half too, that it's like to be more organized. It's like happening meanwhile I'm studying it. And it's extremely fun and extremely happy. And like, as we have like Arab futurism and indigenous futurism and Afrofuturism and African futurism, I'm trying to look what entails Latin American futurism. But also, I'm particularly interested in the relationship between images of technology and images of the future. And that is where the STS element arrives, because it's not just like an ethnography or like look at community practice of future. I'm particularly interested in like how the images of technology are affecting Latin America in those images of the future. And I start to find that like a lot of those things are like came from the global north. It's like a colonizing approach of images of the future that entails images of technology that are totally ungrounded. And that is a phenomenon that like we usually talk in STS, but in futures studies, there's not so much attention. There's like a kind of like technological determinism in a lot of projects, in a lot of scenarios, in a lot of like prospective activities. And it's like, why? And the objects and artifacts are central elements in the discussions of like future things in futures, but not necessarily with like a critical lens. And there is some scholars that does that, but like usually not. Like futures study in the systemic approach, they put technology as like a driver or a catalyzer, but it's like, but technologies are like not necessarily that. And also like they have like an emphasis on material technologies and not in unmaterial technologies or organizations or constitutions. That's what is actually changing in my country, in Chile. And I start to like reflect that when we have those images of the future that are ungrounded, we then assign to the visions of technology that we have around a kind of like a legal solutionism. And those things are carried to communities, to society, are carried to like media, are carried to policy, are carried to like public discussion, are carried to academia strongly. And it's like we are discussing things that actually doesn't happen here. Or like we are discussing things neglecting all the knowledge systems that happen here. And we're like requesting to the global north to like tell us what to do with like emerging technologies, with nanotechnology, with artificial intelligence, with smart cities, with sensors. It's like the level of production in the industry, the level of academic questions is different. It's not lower or higher, like different, but those differences are not acknowledged in the futures that are being constructed in Latin America, and that is what I call anti-futures. And I call anti-futures this in particular because it's not just something that happens on Latin America. Happens in a lot of places that has this like disowned futures, but those disowned futures have technological consequences, and that I think is part of what I'm used to the idea of anti-future. That like we bring futures that are the presence from other places, and how a future can be the presence of other place, I call it anti-future. And my dissertation is focused on Latin American futurism, or and their expressions, their way of doing, and their way of knowing that are like making it special or unique, and the relation with visions of technology. But anti-futures is like a kind of like big phenomena that start to like pop up all over the place. And I have been articulated recently for a talk in I Am Internet. That is like a huge conference that happens in Barcelona like since 7 years ago. And it's like not an academic conference. They engage a lot with like STS in some form, but also with like sustainability and with like different emerging schools of thought. And personally, I think what I'm highly motivated to contribute is to see how like artifact and discourses are actually like oscillating with each other. I ascribe very strongly to like this school of thought is like metamodernity, and I think STS has like a strong metamodernity approach, but that also requires to like approach our research with like a sincere irony. So like, we want to do changes of things, but also we recognize that like we're working in systems that are like deeply screwed in their power dynamics, are deeply inequal, and academia has all that things too. But I think acknowledging all these difficulties can do changes in communities, and with the limitations that like the intellectual world have, I think STS is one of like the most vanguardist intellectual communities to offer reconstructions of what the world is doing that can contribute to like make our life better, or like make acknowledge what are like the actual impacts that technologies have in our everyday life, and to situate the ways in like we see the world today and tomorrow with the lenses of like the current reality, and not just with the expectations and desires that others people more powerful or more influent is envisioning that what the futures look like.
That's a great, roundup of basically not just your own dissertation, but then also, the goods and what STS can bring. But then also, I think more importantly, what you said is bringing that critical lens, because, what does that mean? So this has been a great talk, Martin. We're right at, 30 minutes. So I really appreciate the time that you've brought. I'll put all the links, in the description and the YouTube video. So hopefully you'll get some more eyes on your research and some more papers and stuff. But again, everyone, this is Martin Pérez Comisso, Ph.D. student at Arizona State University's program for Human and Social Dimension of Science and Technology. So thanks for coming on STS Shorts, Martin.
Thank you very much, Nick. Hopefully, this is like the beginning of like a fantastic adventure on conversations with people around the world doing fantastic new ideas for the field and for the communities that we work for.
Of course. Well said. Thank you so much, Martin.
Thanks.